We talk a lot about mental health on this show and the importance of getting help and treatment, but what does that actually look like? This morning, we're talking about depression with a journalist sharing her own first-person experience, inviting readers into her journey through Canada's mental health system, candidly writing about surviving suicide attempts and sharing stories from other people, patients, and practitioners. Her personal story and reporter skills are on full display in Hello, I Want to Die, Please Fix Me. Anna Mehler Paperny joins us now. Anna, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So you go very public with very personal details, and you start right away with talking about your own suicide attempt. Why did you decide to be so honest with your experience?
I felt like I had to. I felt like what I encountered is that so often we sort of talk around mental illness. We talk a big game, we talk about talking, but we don't really get into the details of it. We don't really address the aspects of it that are so painful and so debilitating for so many people. So I felt that if I wanted to address this head on, I really needed to confront it in a fearless and often kind of scary and brutal way.
Scary and brutal, and I imagine for you feeling very vulnerable.
Definitely.
You talk not only about your own story, but you share the stories of other people as well. And you speak with a number of people who shared their stories, and both patients and doctors. And you comment on how people are falling through the cracks in our system, particularly how common it is to lose patients in the transition between inpatient and outpatient care. So what's happening there?
A couple of things. A lot of the time, there just isn't a physician available to take on a patient when they're discharged. So when they're in hospital, usually if the system is working, they're getting sort of very intensive care. They're seeing people every day, they're having someone check up on them, and then they get discharged. And if there isn't sort of a purposeful attempt made to hook them up with someone on the way out, they're left on their own. And that can be an incredibly vulnerable time. I mean, going from living in a hospital to being on your own. And that's something where we need to get better, because otherwise the results can be fatal.
I imagine that, as you said, that is a very vulnerable period, and perhaps the most vulnerable period for people who are coming out of hospital care. Mm-hmm. You also talk in your book about mental health and Canada's Indigenous population, and one of the people you interviewed was the head of clinical practice for mental health care in northern BC, a man named Gordon. What did you learn from him?
I learned from him the kinds of things that the Carrier Sakani Family Services are doing. They're basically taking on themselves something that the government should be handling. They're going almost from door to door on an individual basis, tracking down people who are at a risk of suicide, who have depression, and trying to address this in ways that it's not being addressed by the government, even though the federal government is responsible for healthcare on reserve. So this is something that in Canada, we're very proud of our government-run, government-provided healthcare, but in so many marginalized communities, we are falling down on the job, and the results are devastating.
That takes me really well into my next question, because you do have a chapter in the book that is called Mental Health is for Rich People. So we, like you said, we pride ourselves on our healthcare system here in Canada, but do you feel like it is adequately addressing the needs of mental health patients from all levels of the socioeconomic spectrum?
I really don't. I had a health appointment the other day at a local hospital here in Toronto. They said that they are facing a year-long wait for people who are referred to their services. So if you need the care of a specialist and you don't have coverage through your work, or if you can't pay for a psychologist yourself, if you're waiting to see a psychiatrist, you could be waiting for a year. And imagine if that was the case for something like cancer. If you were referred to see an oncologist and the oncologist said, okay, come back in 2020, we wouldn't stand for it. We'd be outraged. But because in Canada, for so many people, drugs aren't covered and psychotherapy isn't covered. And those are the two main ways that we treat mental illness. For often, the promise of universal health care just is a lie when it comes to mental illness.
Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm awake, which is good.
You're awake, you're here, and you're sharing your story and continuing the conversation that is not an easy conversation to have. Congratulations on the book, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
The book is called Hello, I Want to Die, Please Fix Me.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.